and welcome to the next 100 Days podcast. My name is Graham Arrowsmith.
My name's Kevin Appleby. Graham, today we've got a guest with quite an unusual name. We've got a guest called Eli.
Yeah, Eli Hassell comes from Manchester. I met him a few months ago, and he's quite an interesting young man. He's getting up to all kinds of things, and we're delighted to have you, Eli, on the next 100 Days podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Graham. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I mean, you are part of the north of Manchester Jewish community, and you've got a huge following there. You've started your own podcast. You've got a business called Siteawe. I mean, before I finish the list of things that you're doing, just how old are you?
Oh, I don't say my exact age, but I just want to comment on my podcast. I met you, I think it was around 3 months ago, Graham.
Okay. Yeah, about that, yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't actually start my podcast yet. And then you mentioned you were doing a podcast. That was very interesting. I'm not sure if that was the reason I started my podcast, but a week or two later, I did start my podcast. It definitely played a big part in it. So I've got to say thank you to you.
Oh, I am. It did occur to me that it might have been a slight sort of drop there of inspiration. But having said that, you've just gone and taken action, haven't you? So good for you.
We're going to find out he's got more listeners than us.
Yeah, well, I know, but I mean that's easy done. But from that, but you, I mean, it looks to me that you're in your I'm going to say your early 20s.
Yeah, not too old, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You've been very, very coy on that subject, but you can tell from the pictures. Anybody seeing the video of this that he's not 45 or he's not 70 like Kevin. So basically.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you. I'll have you know, there's no 7 at the start of my age.
No. I know there isn't. But Eli, I mean, you've got your own company called Siteawe. What does Siteawe? That's Siteawe. What does that do?
So I must say you're the first person that actually can pronounce it properly. Most people get it wrong to actually pronounce it. So that's quite good there. But so Siteawe, we do social media, which means we just grow social media accounts and build communities around accounts. The issue is with a lot of accounts right now, or when you hire someone to take over, they just post stuff. They don't try and build a community. They don't try to get followers that fall into that and try and like that community. And that's the difference we're trying to do.
So you help them create these communities. There must be is there a sort of a secret sauce that just things that you do? Is it just sheer perspiration or what?
It's a good question. So one of the main things, which a lot of people know, but it just takes a lot of time to do, is just really interact as much as you can with the audience. Just post a lot, interact as much as you can. And that's you really want to drive that up a lot. And then because you could just take it as an example. If you see one post every day, which is a lot, once a day, but you never interact with it, you still feel part of something, okay. But if you interact with it every single day, the bond you can have is so much greater.
I'm a bit of a laggard when it comes to social media, but Kevin's a little bit further down the path. I think he's a bit more. You got a bit more energy for it, haven't you, Kevin?
Yeah, and to be honest, Graham, we've done Grow CFO. You have mentioned it earlier this week, so you've probably won the bingo. We've built an entire business really around all our marketing being on LinkedIn. Nearly all of our growth has been through finding and meeting people on LinkedIn. And one thing that we found just lately, I think we've crossed some sort of threshold because the number of followers we've got of the Grow CFO company account on LinkedIn is just accelerated through the roof in probably the last 2 or 3 weeks.
That's amazing.
Certainly, there's quite a community of folk that will regularly like and comment on stuff that we put out.
So they must be doing something right then, Eli.
I mean, what I can hear from Kevin, one main thing that really struck out to me, which really helps, is that you've got a community around you that you said that like your posts. So when you have that, you've got that cool community that really helps accelerate your posts and reach so many more people. Because then LinkedIn first see, there's 5 people interacting with it. We'll show it to way more people.
Yeah.
So that's amazing, and that really changes the game, because most people don't have that core community.
So if you're starting out with a new client from Siteawe's point of view, how do you get? I mean, Kevin's been working at his this other business, this Grow CFO, for some time, and the nice thing is it's starting to get traction for him. But the thing about Siteawe is somebody comes in and they really haven't got a Scooby-Doo about social media. They're probably a bit like me, really. But at the end of the day, I probably know more than I'll let on. But the end of the day, the idea is that you're going to give them an endpoint, which is, well, you've got a community. Something's happening for you now. So how do you get them from zero to hero?
Yeah, so it really depends. Some clients, when they give us their account, or they give us control into their account, they've already been using it for 5 years, they've built it up already, and now they say, I want to step back, I want it to get bigger, I want it to get better, and I want you to take over some. I started one a month ago, that was blank. We started with a clap with someone that hasn't ever been on LinkedIn. So it really depends. So some people have got that extra head start. So we've got to thank them, the client. But even still, when we're starting a new account, when we're starting on LinkedIn, like you said, what you said there before, that you've got that cool team, a cool community, liking your posts, we're going to try and get that. And so that really helps accelerate how many people are seeing it, and just connecting as many people as you can, but in the right audience, not just random people.
That's really important, though, isn't it? I mean, you have to start with the person or the people that you actually want to communicate to. Start with the who.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about connecting with as many people as possible, not unless you're a massive celebrity. And that's the whole point. It's just to reach hundreds of thousands, like Mr. Beast or any of these massive people. All they're trying to do is reach a mass audience. They're not trying to reach anyone in particular. But most businesses, they can't afford to reach that many people that quickly. So what you'd want to do is be very, very specific about who you want to attract, and just hit those people. And that's really the best thing you can do.
And when you have those conversations with clients, can you kind of recall the kinds of questions that you might ask them about their who?
Do you mean their target market?
Who their target market is? Yeah.
That's a good question. So it breaks down into several points. Well, the main thing is, are they B2B or B2C? Because that completely determines if they should be on Instagram or LinkedIn, for example. As I'm sure, as you know, LinkedIn is mainly a B2B company. Place. Yeah. So then it's broken down to so what if they know what age demographics are you doing, what ethnicity, because sometimes there might be a certain ethnicity which really helps so much more. Maybe you can use certain words to fit in. Yeah. What current market do you have now? What target market do you want to reach? So do you want to switch over? And those sort of questions really help identify what we're trying to get to.
And that's what you would do to start off with. You'd have that part of the process first.
Yes.
Because what you're not trying to do is almost like shoehorn whatever they do to anybody you can find, because that's kind of like...
Exactly. Like you said, we're trying to find out the who before we start. So those are all before.
Excellent. And I guess, Kevin, your who are aspirant finance officers then?
Yeah, we're finding our who tend to be people that are looking to land their first CFO role, or people that have landed their first CFO role and need help. Yeah. Immediately that puts us into an age group. Our core audience, therefore, are 30-somethings to 40-somethings.
And I presume already, just from that, you can already use certain wordings, because if you're talking to younger people, 20, 30-year-olds, you need to use way simpler wording. Now you can use more like, for example, ROI instead of return on investment. Most 40-year-olds would know what the ROI means.
Yes.
So that really changes on what language you use.
Yeah, and I think we're always talking to qualified accountants. So we're talking to folk who are likely to have been degree educated, will probably have a professional qualification, and therefore will have a capacity to a certain amount more complex language as well. And I think one of the things we've got to do is certainly not talk down to those people. We've got to put interesting and challenging material out into the marketplace. And I think it's a generation as well that's very wise to being sold to. So we've got to avoid selling in every post.
What's the aim with the podcast there?
Podcast, we just cover lots of different topics that would be of relevance to those individuals on a day-to-day basis.
I mean, are you trying to get to know those members? Like, if they're interested in the podcast, I'll reach out to you. Or are you trying?
Yeah, and Grow CFO is a membership community. Yeah, so the aim is to bring people in as free and then premium members to consume the teaching products. So typically this week's podcast and financial planning and analysis is a big area. There's an individual in the States in Salt Lake City who's just started up a business, and he calls himself the FP&A guy. So I had him on the podcast this week.
What does it stand for?
Financial planning and analysis.
Okay. Yeah.
So he was in the day that I recorded him. It was actually day one of his brand new business as the FP&A guy. So it was a great conversation to talk to him about, well, what's FP&A all about? Why do you think you can leave your current job and form a business doing this stuff? What's happening in that particular area? What are all the new products?
So what you're saying, Kevin, is that you're basically producing content for those 30, 40-year-olds who are meeting your requirements. And going back to yourself, Eli, you've got the kind of who sorted out. And to Kevin's point, you're actually producing content that's going to resonate with your desired audience. So is there anything in that particular area that you can sort of educate our listeners to?
Like we mentioned before, it's all about who you're attracting to. So when we create the audience, that's everything. Or even create the profile picture. Everything's in mind to do with what the audience. Because I mean, we mentioned before as well, your audience for that show is 35, 40-year-olds around, and people have high positions. And that's for example, why you'll use more business tended to words like ROI. And that's really also with other profiles that we manage. So that's everything you do has got that underlying factor below what you're trying to aim for, and just try and look for that.
So, I mean, one of the things that you say on your website is that would you like your online followers to do more than just follow? Well, I mean, I work in direct response marketing, and the answer to that is yes. Ultimately, my clients either want their money for investments or for various products or whatever it is, to take action, whatever that action is. Is that the sort of thing that you've got in mind? Do you have a specific brief from some of the people that engage you on social media? Yeah.
So what the first one of the introduction questions when we're meeting with a new client, asking them what they're looking for, is what are you aiming for? Are you aiming for sales, or are you aiming for attention? A lot of businesses aim for attention because they can't sell products here and there. It's way more personalized, and they only need to sell like 5-6 products a year or 5-6 deals a year, and then that's all they're aiming for. Some businesses are products that's aiming for hundreds. So that's the first question, and that really changes how you're going to approach everything, and how you because do you want followers to do more than just follow that? Thanks for bringing out that line. I really like that line. Hope you do too. So that really that can apply to both both parts, but especially to the sales part. The attention is more just remember us and just keep throwing yourself at the potential client, and then they'll very likely to get in touch with you later on.
Yeah, I think that's right. And actually, just beneath that, you've got some featured partners, and one of which is the Jewish Weekly, a family newspaper. Is that based in Manchester?
It's based in UK. I'm not sure if it's based in Manchester or London.
Okay. But certainly, the opportunity to make good in your own, shall we say, community, That's got to, you must have very strong bonds with people and very, very rich seam of business people in the Jewish community, particularly Manchester. And you must be right in the heart of that. So you'll have a queue outside your door wanting to do business with you, won't you?
I'm making it seem as bad that I don't have too many clients.
No, I'm just thinking that you've got more than enough opportunities.
No, yeah, I agree with you, and I'm blessed to have that because, like, for example, we met at, to give an example, we met at BNI, which is Business Network International. And all that is, for people, I'm not sure if everyone knows what it is, but you just, how would you describe it?
Well, it's a networking group of lots of different business types, and they support each other with introductions to business. So
yes,
yeah,
yes, that's a very good meaning what it is, and my community, like you give an example, is that, but just way larger.
Yeah.
So which is amazing to hear, and now I just need to get around to everyone and just to get to know everyone really well. I mean, I'm not saying that will result in anything, but that's what I'm trying to do, and trying to get to know as many people, see if anyone needs this. But there is more of a high chance of people needing it in this community, which is very good for me.
In a nice way, you don't quite have to work as hard to get to know them, because you are them, if you like. You are effectively part of that community.
Oh, I definitely agree with you.
And your family or your friends, etc., will know other people's friends, etc., etc. So, but you're ahead. I mean, in Kevin's case, I mean, if he was amongst a bunch of finance people, that's his sort of community, and probably a lot of people will have heard of him. He's quite well known, aren't you, Kevin? Really?
I don't know.
He's famous.
I suppose I might be. But,
well, the police have got plenty of notices up for you. Man wanted. But no, seriously, I think the opportunity for you to grow your business, especially in Manchester initially at least, is fantastic. But you'll get a name for you, whoever they are, because if you can keep producing results, then clients are going to come along thick and fast for you. So, what's your ambition for Siteawe? What do you want to be able to do with that?
Well, that's a good question. So I really do want to grow. I mean, I've started to take on someone part-time. Hopefully, it's going to be more this year. But I really want to grow really big. I mean, as you mentioned before, I don't just run Siteawe. I run several philanthropy groups. I run a podcast. I like doing a lot of these things. As long as I like, I'll do a lot. So hopefully I'll just continue doing that and just growing it.
I mean, you threw that P word in there, didn't you? And Kevin noticed it as well. But you run a podcast. Now, tell us a little bit about that. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, but tell us.
To that question, Graham, I was just about to ask it.
Well, no, the thing is, I did a little bit of research, which is unusual. But basically, and you
very
actually
unusual, Eli.
I'm honoured.
Well, I noticed that one of your guests was a politician.
Oh yes.
Tell us about that. How did you get the guy to turn up?
I mean, we've had more than just a politician. You might have seen. We've also got. Have you heard of Beaverbrooks the Jewelers?
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah. So we had the chairman of Beaverbrooks the Jewelers on.
Wow.
Which was amazing. Yeah. So that politician, Ivan Lewis, you might be referring to. He's a shadow of Minister for Education for Foreign Affairs. He was doing quite well. I actually met him yesterday as well. Oh. But really, what I did was, you'll be very surprised to hear how I got hold of him. Found his number and just sent him a text, and he said yes. That's it. I didn't get any. You sent him a text.
You didn't even bother writing it down on a piece of paper then. Well, I've got hold of your number, surprise, and here's a text saying I want you to come onto my podcast.
I was very surprised. Usually it takes way more than that, but yeah.
Wow. And tell what did he talk about with you on your podcast?
So it's very interesting because what happened was he's been MP for Bury, where I live, for 20 years, which is a long time to run as an MP, and successfully win every single time. So whilst Jeremy Corbyn was running, he for this 20 years he was part of Labour, but when Jeremy Corbyn was running, he quit the Labour Party. Yeah. And then ran for independent and said, okay, I want to win and take away from Jeremy Corbyn. And then I think he realised he couldn't win. So he backed down and said everyone should vote for Conservative and not vote Labour. So that's really one of the major subjects we talked about, because that's really hard to do, just tell everyone to vote for a party that you don't.
So he's now back with Labour, is he?
No, he retired at that point.
Oh, I see. Understand. Okay. But, because in Bury, I mean, they don't actually count the vote over there. They just weigh them, because there's so many Labour votes anyway. So that,
I didn't actually know that.
No, I'm only kidding. I mean, it's a bit like Wales, or when Joe Biden was elected, they didn't weigh them there. They just kind of they got they lined up the people from the cemeteries and to vote, didn't they? So basically, that's how he got in. But
do you think Donald Trump's going to run for 2024?
Well, I hope so, because they need somebody who's got leadership qualities to come in and help. But there was a hopeless picture of him on social media the other day where he was sort of excluded by the former president, Obama, in a sort of a setting. And he looked like he was on the edge of a conversation. He was trying to get in, but they were ignoring him. But they loved Obama, which is not surprising because he's a magnetic sort of personality, but not so much the most popular president in history.
I have to agree with that one.
No, with anybody else who can count. But seriously, I think going back to your podcast, what do you call your podcast?
Aaron and Eli Podcast, because I do it with a friend. It used to have a different name, but then we changed it.
The Aaron and Eli Podcast, and you get away with that.
Yes, it's very original, isn't
it? It is, but it means that you can talk about anything you like.
Yes, I mean, really, we usually just bring on guests and we just focus around their life. A little bit like this podcast, I think. Yeah. So it makes it so much easier.
Yes. It does, because we, as you know, we're not scripted, but we do like to sort of get to a few points, don't we, Kevin?
We do. And we started off in the early days being much more true to the next 100 days title. It was really always around, if you've got this problem, here's what to do about it in the next 100 days. But as time's gone on, we've been a little bit more liberal with how we've taken to the show. And it's generally, if there's an interesting guest, an interesting subject to talk about, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's driven by us wanting to find out about a subject.
Yeah.
And we'll find a guest that'll talk.
And in your case, what I liked about you when I met you is you had that energy about you, and it's obvious that you're not at the end of your career, you're at the beginning. But what's really interesting we've had a number of young people on the show over the years, and I always find it fascinating because you have a different perspective, and you have that energy and look, your example. I sent an MP or a former MP a text. That's it. I got his number and I sent him a text. He was on my show.
I must say, but that was only one case. I've sent a lot of people a lot of emails, and most of them have ignored me, but it was worth a try.
Yeah, there's one or two that have still ignored me, even though we've been around for 300 odd episodes. There's one or two folk that I'd really have liked to have on this show that still haven't replied to me.
Well, at the end of the day, we're not for everybody, and that doesn't lose me one iota of sleep. It really doesn't, because the truth is, we do attract some very, very interesting guests, and you're one of them. And I just going back to your business, you do podcasts, you do social media, but you also do websites. Tell us about that.
I mean, a lot of social media and websites really linked together. In fact, someone says they want a website. Okay, let's give you a website. Let's do that for you. By the way, you're growing your business. I think it might also want social media. And that's why there's a lot of full marketing full marketing brands, because they offer everything, because they found out when someone wants a social media, wants a website, they want so much more than that. But I'm limiting it just to social media, because I think social media and websites, I mean, I think they're very closely connected, and I've got a lot of experience in both. But I think if it goes further than that, it just goes out of control. But yeah, that's really, I mean, we're finishing off a website next week, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and I'd agree with you there, Eli. And what's your social media ultimately trying to do? It's probably trying to bring somebody into your sphere of influence, and they'll want to go somewhere to find out more about you, which is your website.
Well, it really depends. Sometimes it'll be different, but yeah, mainly it's that. Yeah,
and we're, say, Grow CFO, we're putting a lot of blog posts out at the moment. if a blog post goes out, it's talked about on social media. The purpose of the social media post is to introduce the blog post and get people back to the site to read the full post.
Do you mind asking what is that blog post? Did you just copy it? Did you write transcript the podcast?
There are various things. There are blog posts that are thought pieces. There are the show notes for the podcast always goes out as a blog post. But that'll be a different format. And in fact, our social media for Grow CFO started. Really, we were only posting a couple of times a week, and each time it was promoting the podcast for that particular week. But now we're promoting thought pieces, white papers, blog posts on general topics.
You post clips on the podcast online. Yeah,
we do for this podcast. We do for the Grow CFO show. Graham, there'll be 2 posts go out for this podcast on Friday morning. One from me, which will be an automatic feed from the website where the show notes are, and then one from Graham that'll be centered around a video clip. And we do something very similar for the Grow CFO show as well. Yeah.
I really favor my stuff around promoting the podcast around video content, like clipping parts I found really interesting.
Yeah.
People
I saw, I think it might have been your first video. Somebody prompted you to do more videos, and you rather, if you don't mind me saying, nervously, and we've all done it, I promise you, we've all done it. Kevin once got me to do what was that thing that you said that I should try? Some social media thing that came out.
It's so long ago and so unsuccessful. I've forgotten what it was called now.
But anyway, whatever it was, I sort of you turn on and you record and you're live. So it's kind of before Facebook Live, but it was the same sort of idea. I didn't really know what to say, but I just spoke BS for a good 2 minutes, and it just felt so unnatural. But now I think, to your point, we do clips, and they're usually only about a minute, maybe 2 at most. If it's a really interesting guest, like for instance, the one that we released last week, as we record this, was a lady who runs a company called Apis Core, and they basically print walls with 3D print material, and it's a fascinating area designed to help affordable housing. But she's very interesting, and she basically her podcast video clip has had the most views on my account than anybody else this year. So effectively, she's done really well. I don't know whether that's because she's a young woman, and I don't mean that to be sexist or anything, but truth is, a good-looking young woman will outpull an ugly old man like me, and I think that's just a truism. I think I might be wrong about it, but I believe that is the case. In Anna's case, her story is so inspiring. I think that's what's behind her success.
I mean, I would think if you clipped out her story, that might be the reason that brought people in it more. But it's very interesting. I love to hear people's stories, how they success, their failure. In the last podcast I did, not to plug it, but the story was about about his up and down, and how he's starting a new business now, and how he ran a multi-million pound business as a teenager. That's fascinating. I'd love to hear that. And I had amazing reviews from that. So that's really it. People love to hear such inspiring stories. So that if you clip that part out, that might be a massive reason.
Yeah. We're going to have to clip part of this out to showcase you. So you'll have to say something interesting.
Oh no, I need to think of something now.
That's probably the clip.
There was that pregnant pause there. He could have just bolted Kevin. We could have been over and done with that. But
Eli, there is something interesting. There's a commonality between your podcast and our podcast, that we're fairly broad on the subject matters that we cover. Now, I've found in some ways that though we've been going several hundred episodes with this podcast, because we're speaking about subjects that appeal to lots of people rather than a distinct niche, then it's harder to build an audience. And I found it far easier to build an audience with the Grow CFO show because I'm speaking directly to a very, very targeted audience.
Yeah, yeah.
No, that's definitely true.
How do you find building an audience when you're covering a lot of general subjects?
Yeah, so answer, but just to go back on your point there, I agree with you that it's easy to build an audience when you've got a specific point in mind. And it's also easy to sell them something or to say, check out my website, which is essentially you're pushing them to selling them to go on your website. So it's definitely easier to do that. So how is it for me to build an audience? Is that the question?
Yep.
Oh, brilliant. Sorry. Thanks for that. So I have a lot of existing people following me already, whether it's, I use my WhatsApp a lot, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Facebook, even if it's TikTok. I'm not gonna lie, I don't use TikTok much, but those platforms I already had an existing platform on already, so that was extremely helpful to start. I did have a head start, but it was still consistently posting.
Can I ask, if you're marketing yourself as a somebody who can guide people with social media, do you have a hierarchy of social media that you prefer? So you prefer this one at the top, this one next, this one third?
Of course. So for B2B, LinkedIn, I could say that's out the window. That's definitely definitely the one you should go for.
Yeah.
For B2C, then it really depends what you're trying to do. If you're trying to do, like I said, it all depends on what you're trying to do. If you're just trying to reach as many people as possible, then maybe go on TikTok. If you're trying to reach younger people, as many people as possible, not trying to sell something, go on TikTok. If you're trying, but it doesn't convert well on TikTok, any sale. So if you're trying to do something like that, then you would want to go on a different platform. If you're trying to do B2C to 50-year-olds and older, you would want to go on Facebook. So if you go, I prefer LinkedIn, definitely. But then overall, then it really depends on what your target market is and what you're trying to do. Yeah, that's so.
Your 50+ market, many of them are actually on Facebook. Then is what you're saying?
B2C, yeah.
B2C, yeah. Obviously, I being over 50, I recognise that that's true. But there's also quite a number of younger people on there as well. To me, younger means sort of like 30s and 40s.
Yes, but it's that. Yeah, exactly. So there is a bit younger, there's a bit older, but usually I'd say if it's 50 above, then you go on Facebook and you're trying to do B2C. Sometimes if you do 40, 30, okay, maybe that also works as well.
I've had this conversation with other people, Eli, but if you wanted to try and get wealthy over 50s, high net worth, which tends to be my market, I've always found it difficult to sort of justify spending money on social media for clients. And I wouldn't be doing that. It'd be somebody like you, for instance, if you could find high net worth individuals. Do you think that that's something that is possible with social media?
To find high net worth
individuals on social media?
Yes, you just have to target it properly because, like I said, you really need to understand what you're aiming for. You're not trying to, if they're high net worth, let's be honest, they're not going to be going on LinkedIn or Instagram every single day.
No.
So you need to really understand the case. So they're more likely to be on LinkedIn than on this platform. Or is it worth posting and just waiting for them to come to me? Or should I just go to each one of them, send a personalized message to each one with just some posting to know that with some posts already on my account to know that I'm alive and that I do stuff and I'm not just a scammer. So you need to really think about the approach, what you want to take. But it is possible, yes.
Okay. And moving on, You've also have been producing films, haven't you? Or at least a film.
A film, yes.
Is there any end to this man's talents?
No, absolutely not. Tell us a bit about this film that you produced.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Graham. So I started an anti-bullying film with a friend, but it's not what we're trying to do. Actually, it's more than just a film. It's a whole lesson plan for a teacher. So the film is just one thing amongst the many.
Oh,
yeah. Hopefully that's what we're trying to do. We've got a lesson plan written down, and what we're trying to pair up with an international organisation. We met them before. We just need to send them the final film and confirm it's happening. And they'll send it around to all their teachers internationally. and that's amazing effect that we've got, and we're going to try and go far on YouTube. So we're going on various techniques on how to reach a lot of people. But I mean, we've done the film already. We've sent it. We've nearly finished it, but the nearly finished part that we've sent to people. A psychotherapist has got back to us and said they've shown it to 1 or 2 of their patients, and it's really changed them, which I found amazing to hear.
Oh.
But just regarding how we did the film, the whole point of it was bullying isn't physical anymore. Well, there is, but it's mainly verbal or online.
Right.
And all the bullying films I see, and all the bullying films that I think other people see, it's all about physical, or it's all about online bullying. So online bullying is a good one, but physical feels a bit outdated if you're showing it to kids or whoever it was. So what our aim was to do it, make verbal bullying that everyone feels, that everyone is a victim to. It's not, oh, look at you, you're a fat, whatever it is. It's just you're talking nicely to someone, but then you accidentally make fun of each other. Or you're not trying to, you just you leave that person out. You didn't realize he has feelings. So that's what we're trying to really approach into this whole thing, to really teach people, first of all, how not to be a victim, like how to save yourself. And also the bullies, bullies, I don't like to use that term, but just to really teach them, this is what you're doing, these people have feelings, and that's really, that's really the... So,
I mean, life's moved on since I was at school, should I say. Are you saying that if you hurt somebody's feelings, that's the same as bullying?
No. It really depends how it's put out. So if it's put out like it's quite obvious, like I'm doing it deliberately, then you might agree with me. What I do, it's a good question.
Because the only reason I'm saying that, just to give you a chance to think it through, but basically the only reason I'm saying that, Eli, is that bullying used to be, and I've been subject to it, and I'm sure others have said, well, when you were at school, you pushed me or whatever. But at the end of the day, it used to be physical, and yes, verbal as well, and you'd be using industrial language, and I can still hear some of that language down at Elland Road on a Saturday. It still exists apparently. If you're watching football. Especially if your football team's drawing and we should be winning, but that's another story. But the thing about it is that I don't know whether or not the modern generation has picked up on so many different ways to be a victim. Now there's almost a culture of being a victim, and there's almost like you have to live in the world and get used to the fact that some people are just, well, arses. And so it's just a question of steering away from them and keeping them out of your life. But I suspect if you really need help, then your help's going to come along. And you might not agree with that. I'm just trying to work out why there seems to be more emphasis on things like mental health, on bullying, etc. And is it just that the term has spread a bit? The term has encapsulated a lot more.
Yeah, so I'll just answer the question by just saying some of my personal experience. When I was in school, maybe 1 or 2 physical alterations, but not really much. I did get online bullied. I had 1 or 2 cases. So,
right.
And I got those verbal bits in here. Not people that did it on purpose, but it was just unconsciously. And then that's really the trend that's happening. There's less physical, more verbal, and more online. And then to answer the question on the point of mental health, it's quite interesting about this because I discussed this with the Ivan Lewis, which is a politician, on our latest podcast. Not latest, the one from last week, 2 podcasts ago. Yeah. So he started a mental health charity, and what he said was he wishes people or the law recognize mental health as much as it is for physical health. For example, when you get hit, you can just go to NHS and they'll help you get fixed. He said that should be the same with depression, or the same with those other points that a lot of people not only in schools, but a lot of people everywhere get. So that's one of the main points that's addressing. Mental health is important, and
I mean, if somebody's suffering, the last thing I want to do is step in, is get in the way of getting them help. I mean, that just makes some sense. I just wonder whether or not there are some self-therapies out there that, just I don't mean stiff upper lip. I don't mean that particularly, because I don't think that's particularly helpful. But the fact is, we all have to live together, and there's got to be ways of managing your circumstances so that you don't get into bullying situations. But what was interesting?
Do you mean by ignoring, like running away from the bully?
Yeah, kind of. I suppose. I suppose metaphorically, yes. Why? Probably the safest thing to do is to walk away or run away.
Oh yes, if there's definitely a physical altercation or someone trying to bully you, then of course in that case run away. But just in the long term, it's not a healthy thing to do. Just to play victim. I mean, I'm sure as you know, you would rather teach someone how to stick up for themselves.
Yeah, I would.
And this is almost what we try to do, just verbally. So instead of trying to instead of just walking away every time, say, oh, by the way, this hurt me, or obviously in a way that isn't, people are just going to look down upon. But there are ways you can face bullying, verbal bullying.
But your film has dealt with some of that, and when bullying gets, and it never used to be like this unless somebody invaded your home, but basically now, because you carry these mobile phones around with us, and kids are on the phones or on their laptops or iPads or whatever, it just comes into their home. I mean, all this nastiness, and that I do feel there has to be something that can stop that. I don't know about you, Kevin, but it would crucify me if my kids or now my grandchild would face that at some point.
And this is the complete other side of the always on culture. We can communicate to people anytime we want, wherever we are. And yeah, there are a lot of pluses for that, but at the same time, that leaves us open all of the time for the communication that we don't want. And let's face it can either be malicious or it can be just unwanted because of quantity. You can't get away from it.
But it does lead, and these are really, I suppose, unintended, but it depends on your perspective. It leads to things like the former president of the United States being banned from Twitter. Because effectively, but if you follow the logic that basically that, you can't say anything to anybody, those mean tweets, and we can't possibly have him on Twitter. But the Ayatollah over in Iran and other people.
The Trump one was a bit different because it resulted in some people dead. So, I mean, I'm not exactly sure on the situation, if it was his fault, if it wasn't, but it is a bit different than just a mean tweet that people get. Because if it was just a mean tweet, then I agree with you, definitely not, given free speech. But in this, it was a bit different situations, although I'm not sure if he's in the right or in the wrong. I'm sure you've got your personal opinions on that.
No, I do, but what I'm trying to get at is that it basically leads to suppression of free speech. And I think it's a very, very dangerous. And in this week, when we're recording, Elon Musk has just bought 9.2% of Twitter, got onto their board. Now, will that change Twitter? Perhaps to become more of the town hall it should be, and less of the preaching, self-important left-wing organization that it is. So for me, I think there is the problem that I think some of the spreading of these issues is that it potentially affects some fundamental issues that we all have, which is free speech. Might not agree with me in turning off.
I do agree with you on that point about free speech. We need to protect in all rights, and
yes,
it's getting under attack by the companies themselves by banning it. And I do agree with you on that. But the issue is, there's so many issues with this. First of all, who controls it? The private companies or the government? And can we really trust either of them to do it? No. I would say no.
No.
And exactly.
Well, they're not private really, because they're an arm of government, but they and therefore they should be legislated as such. But that's another story. We're changing this podcast into a political one, and I don't really want to do that particularly. But the important thing is that you are providing services in marketing and podcasting and film, as you've said. You're a very talented young man, and I have to say, Kevin, Eli's going to be something different. You can tell already, because you've got so many different things going, so many horses running, that I don't even know if the horse has started running that's going to make your fortune. or at least make your name. And I just wonder just how far you can go. Have you got massive ambition that you haven't mentioned so far?
Well, let me try on the political one. So, like I said, I brought some people on, some people that are involved in politics on the podcast, and the one I mentioned before, Ivan Lewis, I actually met him yesterday.
Yes.
Because on the podcast, he said, if anyone's interested in talking about politics and getting into politics, send me a message, and I'll meet with you in a restaurant. And we'll talk over.
Right.
So I said on the podcast, I'm interested. So we met yesterday. I took the chance while it's there. So we met yesterday, and it was very interesting. And he inspires me to take action. So as soon as we finished talking yesterday, I put in my I bought a membership in a political party, and I've signed up to help volunteer. And I really do want to help out within the politics. I mean, I went to Parliament. I'm sure you might have seen on my LinkedIn. Went to Parliament 2 weeks ago, I think it was, and that was a fascinating experience. So yeah. So
you might be an MP at some point. I've actually been thinking, given that I did the research on your podcast, I was thinking that we should invite an MP on. I don't think we've ever had an MP on, Kevin.
No, we've never had an MP. We've had a political advisor before. We had one of Tony Blair's advisors on before, who you used to work for once upon a time.
Yeah. Well, yes, indeed. Derek, and sort of sadly, Derek's been struck down by COVID in a long-term way, but yeah, I mean, he was quite he was a spin doctor, which I can imagine that you'll be in the future of some sort, spinning the truth, not telling the rest of us what you really think.
Well, I'll tell you what I really think, but there's sometimes when you're in politics, I've come to realize you've got to sometimes just avoid certain topics. There's some arguments it's not worth getting into.
Got you.
And it can look the other way from some people. Like, to some people, you're just spinning the truth and you're not saying the truth. And I can easily see where that comes from. But it's just, there's some arguments, especially when you're in a certain political party, and for some reason everyone says, oh, you need to agree with whatever they say, which shouldn't be the case, but that's how it is. So then you have to, if you're going against the grain or about certain topics, you're going to take on some fight. So there's a lot of issues with this, but yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Eli, you're going to have to develop a skill that's very different to the one you've demonstrated this afternoon. You've been an excellent guest this afternoon by answering the questions that have been asked to you. Now, if you're going to be a politician, you've got to become very good at answering a different question to the one that was actually asked.
Given the answer that you want to give to the question that we didn't ask you. So yeah, I've got to say, you have been, and Kevin, he's absolutely right, have been a great guest today on the Next 100 Days podcast.
So, Graham, what a young man. A man of many, many talents.
Very much so. It's like a renaissance man, isn't it? I mean, knows about marketing. He's going to go into politics. There's just a film producer. I mean, there's just no end to his talents, and that bodes well for him as an individual. But his family must be very proud of him.
Yeah, if we're still podcasting in 5 years' time, Graham, it'd be nice to just get Eli back and see where he's gone to.
Oh goodness, yeah, so much to talk about. Seriously, the question was, you might not even have that horse running, and there he was. He was saying, we hadn't figured out the politician's angle, but that's come out of left field. So I wonder if is it going to be filmmaking? Is it going to be marketing? Is it going to be social media in some way, or is it going to be?
Who knows? My experience is, if you plan these things, they don't happen. If you don't plan them, they tend to arrive. You never know what's around the corner, where the next opportunity is going to lead.
What was really interesting is that he texted the MP and he said, yes, come onto the podcast, and he recorded a podcast. And then the guy said, anybody interested in politics? And then Eli said, I am. So he took action. He took action not just once, but twice when he did the podcast itself, and 3 times once he'd followed up on the invitation to get involved in politics.
Yeah.
Now that's pretty impressive. And he's not going to declare his age, but I'll have to find it out. The point is, he's shown remarkable, fortitude just to get that done. I mean, so many people wouldn't have bothered.
No, exactly. And Graham, if you think about this podcast, did we ever really plan that we were going to do a 300 plus episode podcast?
No. It's just, it just rolls on. I always enjoy doing it. It's good fun. I mean, it's all.
How many interesting people have we met? Or doors opened, or journeys changed have happened as a result of doing it?
Lots. Lots.
I think life is all about the connections that you make and where they take you and the doors they open. And many of them you cannot plan. They just happen.
Agreed completely. And some of the people that, when I look back through the names, and I was doing something similar, the Google My Business thing's changing. And I got an email from Google saying that, Google My Business is changing. And so part of the setup for my company, Finally Fettled, I wanted to put some more videos on. So all I've done is just use some of the next 100 days stuff. And I just put like a little, front piece on there, say, Graham asks a question. And basically, I've just loaded up a number of those onto my YouTube channel, only about a minute long for each one, just clips that we've done from various podcasts. And it's quite interesting. We're actually asking people, when I look at it, we're asking people some quite good questions. And they give brilliant answers. So, it's just, all I've done it for is just to say, look, if you come to me from a business point of view, then I'll be asking you questions, sort of thing. Because, at the end of the day, that's part of that first bit, isn't it? Who do you want to work with? Who do you want to target, and so forth?
So that's probably intimidated all our audience sufficiently not to come to you for business.
Oh, well, yeah, I did think about that. But no, I think people want to know that you're capable. And so often they'll turn up at my door and say, I've listened to your podcasts. I've checked you out on the internet, etc. So or have been referred to. Somebody
often these days, Graham, people turn up at your doorstep ready to buy.
Oh, yeah,
They've had so many opportunities to check you out.
Yeah, absolutely so. And look, you're not going to be right for everybody. And that's the case. And, I don't.
And half of the stuff you're putting out is about repelling the people that aren't right for you.
Ah, well, there you are. And actually, if you, this podcast alone, some of the things I might have said, some people might be saying, oh, I can't possibly work with him because he's an X, Y, and Z. And I'm thinking, okay, don't worry, I'm not going to lose any sleep. I'd much rather you go to somebody else.
It's probably only Joe Biden that's saying that, Graham.
Well, yeah, I can't imagine me ever working for Joe Biden. The truth is, I think the opportunity is for young men like Eli and this is the lesson, I guess, for everybody listening to this, is take your opportunities.
Yeah,
and especially when you're young, because if he messes up in politics, he's way young enough to go and do something else. So, take your opportunities.
Absolutely. And on that bombshell, Graham.
And on that bombshell, I've been Graham Arrowsmith.
I've been Kevin Appleby. Goodbye.
Goodbye.